They said nothing survived the river that night, yet Claire pulled a fox woman from the black water, her eyes burning like dying stars. She didn't know that saving the stranger would make her the target of a hunt and bind her to an oath older than the city itself. Claire Mercer was used to maps and numbers, not miracles. A flood response surveyor, she spent her days in ruined districts measuring losses with an engineer's cold precision. That night, the river was higher and angrier than any model predicted. The storm ripped the sky open and threw rain down like nails. She heard it then, not the siren of a rescue drone, not the metallic groan of the old levee, but a single, sharp cry that didn't sound human. She almost convinced herself it was the wind. Almost. The makeshift bridge shook under her boots as she spotted a shape spinning in the torrent. A woman with fox-like ears, fighting the river's pull. A flicker of light beneath the surface followed her like a predator's eye. Claire had no time to question what it was. The rescue was desperate. Claire tied herself to a stanchion, waded in up to her chest, feeling the river drag at her legs as if something down in the deep wanted to claim them both. By the time she hauled the fox woman up the muddy bank, Claire's lungs burned and her arms were shaking. The woman's lips were blue, her fingers clawing at the ground as if clinging to life itself. When the fox woman's eyelids fluttered open, Claire saw something there that unsettled her. Recognition, as if the stranger had been waiting for her. The woman reached up, weak but deliberate, and brushed her fingers across Claire's cheek. A pulse of warmth spread under Claire's skin, too vivid to be a trick of adrenaline. The storm raged on. Claire found a maintenance alcove above the levee for shelter. The fox woman, drenched and trembling, leaned into Claire as if listening for her heartbeat. Hours passed before the stranger whispered her first word in broken common, a word that translated roughly as mate. Claire stiffened. She had walked away from promises before, had the scars to prove it. But the way the word left the fox woman's mouth felt nothing like a plea. It sounded like a vow. The next night brought more questions than answers. While drones searched the flooded streets, Claire caught sight of two dark shapes moving just beyond the edge of their firelight. Their eyes reflected the glow like twin embers. Massive, scaled forms hunched low, watching but not approaching. The fox woman, who would later accept the name Elara, whispered to them in a language Claire couldn't decipher. They lowered their heads as if in deference, and then simply waited in the shadows. A chill went down Claire's spine. The city's security forces would never tolerate such creatures loose near the levee. She kept her hand close to her emergency beacon, but didn't use it. Something told her that calling for help would bring more danger than safety. She tried to question Elara, pointing at the beasts, at the pendant around her own neck that Elara had studied so intently. Elara only traced a scar across Claire's knuckles and murmured a single phrase in halting common. "You saved me. I'm bound. I keep you." The words lingered long after the storm's roar faded. Toward dawn, the river fell quiet, but in the silence came a new sound, distant, mechanical, too rhythmic to be water. Claire went still, listening. Far out beyond the levee, through the fog and drizzle, a pale searchlight swept the bank. For an instant, it lit the scaled backs of the beasts beside Elara before vanishing again. Whoever manned that light would have seen something impossible, and might already be reporting it. Elara rose and stood beside Claire, her wet hair trailing like a banner in the dawn breeze. Her voice was soft but steady. "Where you go, I go. Where you are threatened, I answer." Claire knew then that she had crossed a threshold. Saving Elara had not merely changed a single life. It had drawn her into a larger current, one that might bring her into conflict with the very city she had sworn to serve. She stared out at the fog-veiled river, wondering whether the thing she had rescued was truly a victim, or the herald of something far more dangerous. Claire had learned to trust silence. The long, low stretches of quiet in flooded districts often said more than any government bulletin. That morning, the silence felt wrong. It wasn't the soft hush of dawn, but the listening quiet of a city holding its breath. Elara moved with her, as if they had always traveled together. Her bare feet made no sound on the cracked levee stones. Her fox-like ears tilted and swiveled at distant noises Claire couldn't hear. The two scaled beasts, one pale as river fog, the other dark as deep water, padded behind them. They made the hair on Claire's arms rise, but neither beast ever came closer than Elara's calm gesture allowed. Claire's comm unit buzzed with low-priority alerts from New Meridian's emergency network. Unidentified anomaly. Riverbank Sector 7. All field personnel to report sightings. She silenced it. Reporting Elara now would mean armed security drones and containment protocols, maybe worse. A few years ago, she would have obeyed without question. Now she found herself walking beside the anomaly. They crossed a section of broken river wall and saw signs that others had passed through in the night. Deep boot prints, heavier than a worker's, and a small round depression that looked as if some scanning device had been set down and powered up. Whoever was hunting had come close. "Hunters," Elara murmured, her accent rounding the words strangely. She crouched to touch the edge of one print. Her fingers came away with a faint blue shimmer, residue from field sensors used by the city's bio division. Her eyes narrowed, and the white beast rumbled deep in its chest. Claire's instincts prickled. "They'll be back," she said. "We can't stay out in the open." They found refuge in an abandoned pump station half a mile upriver. The place smelled of rust and river silt, but its walls were solid, and it still had a hatch they could bar from the inside. Claire scavenged what she could: a cracked lantern, a length of insulated cable, a rain-bloated first aid kit. Elara watched with quiet intensity, as though memorizing every move. When they finally settled in the corner of the station, Elara spoke again in careful comment. "Your people, they will not let me live if they know." Claire hesitated. Honesty had a weight of its own. "Not as you are. They'll want to study you first. And your friends out there?" She nodded toward the dragons. "They'll call them threats. Maybe weapons." Elara tilted her head as if puzzling over a distant echo. "Once, your kind made treaties with mine. That was before the Iron Towers and the burning skies. You do not remember?" The question landed like a pebble dropped into deep water, sending ripples into a past Claire had never considered. "I've never heard of any treaty," she said. "Maybe that's the kind of history they stopped teaching." Elara reached out, as if to touch Claire's arm, then thought better of it. "The river remembered you. That is why it brought you to me." Before Claire could reply, a low hum threaded the air, faint but growing. The beast stiffened. Claire turned off the lantern and crept to a crack in the metal shutters. Outside, over the fog-gray water, 3 small lights moved in a search pattern. Drones. Their rotors made a whine that set Elara's ears flat. Claire's fingers tightened on the edge of the shutter. The drones carried survey pods, or sometimes weapons pods. The lead unit paused mid-air as if tasting the currents, then swung its sensor dome toward the pump station. Claire's breath stopped. The white beast shifted, claws scratching against concrete, but Elara murmured a soft command that froze it in place. Her eyes glinted in the thin spill of moonlight. She didn't look afraid. She looked calculating. The drone's beam swept the station's exterior, then moved on. The sound of rotors faded into the distance. Only then did Claire let out the breath she'd been holding. "They'll report this area," she said in a low voice. "We can't stay here long. By tomorrow they'll send a manned skimmer." Elara lowered her head slightly, fox ears twitching. "Then we go before they come. There is a place where the old forest meets the water. My kin may still listen there." Her words hinted at something Claire had never dared imagine, that Elara was not the last of her kind. Night pressed close around the pump station. The flood-stained walls and the damp smell of river mud felt like a thin barrier against what waited in the dark. Search drones, government hunters, and perhaps other things Claire could not name yet. She lay awake with her pack as a pillow, listening to the soft breathing of the beasts and the near-silent rustle of Elara's movements. Just before dawn, she heard Elara whisper to one of the beasts in that unearthly language again. The creature shifted, turned its head toward the river, as if hearing something miles away. A low growl rolled out of its chest. Claire opened her eyes. "What is it?" Elara's answer was a whisper. "The water carries word. They are already coming." A cold prickle slid down Claire's spine. She thought of the searchlight from the previous night, of the blue shimmer residue on the boot print. The hunters weren't guessing anymore. They were closing in. In that dim hour between night and day, as the river mist curled through cracks in the old station's walls. Claire felt the edges of the choice she had made, to save a drowning stranger. That choice was now calling the hunters to her door. And for the first time she wondered whether the creatures she had taken in, the foxwoman and her dragons, were to hunt it alone, or if some part of the hunter's fear was justified. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the river swelled and restless. Claire and Elara moved out before the city skimmers began their patrols. The two dragons padded silently at their heels, their massive bodies blending with the fog rising from the riverbank. Claire had worked in crisis zones long enough to know how to move unseen. Keep low, avoid open spaces, listen for the hum of machines. Yet the knowledge that hunters were closing in tightened her chest. Every sound, the clatter of loose stone, the distant drone of engines, felt amplified. Elara guided them along narrow paths carved by old floods, avoiding roads and drone routes. She moved as if she knew the river's moods better than anyone born in the city. When she paused, the dragons paused too, as if all three shared the same unspoken warning. A mile upriver they found a section where the old forest had crept back down to the water's edge. Gnarled roots snaked over cracked concrete, and branches heavy with rain arched above them like a ragged green canopy. The air smelled of wet soil and moss, a world apart from the concrete and steel of New Meridian. "This way," Elara said quietly, pointing toward the darker heart of the woods. "The river is shallower there. The land remembers." Claire didn't ask what that meant. She focused on the path ahead, though she couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. By late morning, they reached the ruins of an ancient floodgate, its massive doors twisted and broken. Beyond it, the forest thickened and the roar of the river dimmed. Here, birdsong returned in cautious bursts. Claire allowed herself a breath of relief until a shadow swept over them. The white dragon's head snapped up, nostrils flaring. The darker beast hissed low in its throat. Claire followed their gaze and saw it, a skimmer drone, larger than the scouts from the night before, hovering at the tree line. Its sensor array pivoted toward them with a soft mechanical click. "Elara," Claire hissed. Elara moved faster than Claire had ever seen. She raised one hand and whispered a word that sounded like wind through reeds. The dragons shifted, spreading their wings with a hiss of scales. Before the drone could broadcast, the dark dragon spat a jet of searing mist that struck the skimmer's undercarriage. Sparks flared. The machine shuddered, lost lift, and plummeted into the river with a splash that sent birds shrieking into the air. The victory was short-lived. Claire's comm unit crackled, catching a fragment of a city transmission. "Unit 7 down. All teams converge on river coordinates." "Repeat. Converge. They'll be here soon," Claire said. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. "We need to move," Elara nodded, but her gaze lingered on the place where the skimmer had fallen. "They will not stop. They want what I carry." Claire stared at her. "What you carry? You mean the dragons?" Elara shook her head, her damp hair falling loose over her shoulders. "Not only them, a memory. A seed of what was promised between our peoples long ago. They think it a weapon. It is not." Before Claire could press further, a distant whine of engines carried through the trees. The hunters were already closing in. They moved deeper into the forest, following deer trails and dried creek beds until they reached a hollow beneath an old, lightning-struck oak. The dragons crouched close, their eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. Claire crouched beside Elara, trying to catch her breath. "If they find us out here, they'll bring heavier weapons." Drones were just the start. Elara looked at her with that same unsettling calm, though Claire thought she saw a flicker of worry beneath it. "I told you the river remembers. So does the land. We are not as alone as we seem." Before Claire could ask what she meant, a strange tremor passed beneath the earth, subtle but real, as if the roots themselves shifted. A moment later, a figure stepped out from between two moss-darkened stones. It was an old man, bent but not frail, wearing garments that seemed stitched from bark and river grass. His eyes were the same amber shade as Elara's. He looked first at Claire, then at Elara, and finally at the dragons, before speaking in a slow, melodic voice that carried a weight of years. "You brought her back," he said, addressing Elara, "and a human as well." That will stir the sleeping waters. Elara bowed her head slightly. The hunters already stir them. We need safe passage. The old man's eyes lingered on Claire. Safe passage is not easily given to those who carry the scent of the city. But the forest still remembers the pact. For her sake, we will hear you. Claire felt the weight of unseen eyes in the shadows. Other foxfolk, perhaps, hidden and watching. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, as though listening. Before any of them could speak further, a distant boom rolled across the river valley. A column of black smoke began to rise above the tree line. The hunters had reached the fallen skimmer and were burning the wreck to keep their pursuit hidden. The old man's expression hardened. You have brought the war to our doorstep sooner than we wished. We will have to move before nightfall. Claire's heart sank. She had wanted only to save a life. Instead, she had ignited a chain of events pulling them all toward a conflict she barely understood. As the forest shadows deepened and the dragons shifted restlessly, Claire realized the brief moment of safety had already passed. The hunters were not simply tracking them anymore. They were driving them, pushing them deeper into the wild, into a territory where the land's memory might yet awaken. Darkness settled over the forest like a slow tide. Mist coiled between the trees, softening the moonlight into pale silver streaks. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, of rain still caught in the canopy. Claire moved through the underbrush behind Elara, every step careful. The two dragons slinked ahead, their movements unnervingly quiet for creatures so massive. Only the faint ripple of muscle beneath their scales betrayed their readiness to strike. Behind them, the elder foxman led the way. He moved with the steady grace of someone who belonged to this place, following deer trails so narrow that Claire had to angle her shoulders to pass. Once, he paused to lay a hand on a tree trunk, murmuring words in his own tongue. The tree's leaves shivered, though there was no wind. They will be here by nightfall, he said quietly. His amber eyes turned to Claire. The hunters are persistent. You should leave her. Go back to your people while you still can. Claire shook her head. I pulled her out of that river. I don't walk away now. The elder studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod, as if he had expected no other answer. They pressed on until they reached a shallow ravine cut by an old stream. The dragons crouched low near the edge, scanning the dark woods. Their nostrils flared as if catching scents too faint for human senses. Elara touched Claire's arm gently. The hunters will come with weapons that burn the air. My kin will stand, but we must reach the hollow stone before dawn. It is the last place the old pack still shields. Claire tightened her grip on her rifle, not that it would do much against drones or dragons. Then we keep moving. The night hunt began with a distant hum. At first it sounded like nothing more than the wind rushing through the upper branches. But then it grew into a high-pitched whine, the sound of hover engines sweeping the terrain. Red tracking beams flickered through the mist. Claire glanced back. 3 search drones glided in a staggered line, their sensor domes scanning the ground below. Somewhere behind them, the heavy thrum of a skimmer's engines followed, carrying human soldiers. Elara whispered a word to the white dragon. The beast slipped into the darkness like a phantom, its pale hide almost invisible against the mist. The dark-scaled dragon stayed at her side, tail lashing soundlessly against the ground. The elder signaled them toward the ravine. They slid down the slope, just as the first searchlight swept the tree line above. Mud and loose stone crumbled under Claire's boots. She landed in a crouch, heart hammering. For a long moment they waited in the shadows while the searchlight combed the ravine's edge. The drone paused, its sensor dome tilting downward. The red beam brushed the ground barely a few feet away. Claire held her breath. Suddenly, a roar split the night, not from the dragons, but from deeper in the forest. A bellow so deep it vibrated through the earth. The drone's lights jerked up, drawn by the sound. The elder smiled faintly. The forest remembers, he murmured. A second roar followed, closer this time, and then the underbrush thrashed as something massive moved between the trees. The drone shifted course, veering away toward the sound. Claire stared at the elder. What was that? He shook his head. Not all of the old ones left. Some still answer when called. Elara touched Claire's shoulder and urged her forward. We cannot stay to see. Come. They moved fast through the ravine. the sound of engines fading behind them as the unseen creature distracted the hunters. The moon climbed higher, casting pale light through gaps in the canopy. At a narrow pass between two boulders, they paused to drink from a trickle of clean water. Claire's muscles ached from hours of tense, silent movement. She caught Elara studying her with a strangely solemn expression. "What is it?" Claire asked. Elara hesitated, then spoke quietly. "When you pulled me from the river, you took a risk that few of your kind would take. The hunters believe that risk is for power, that you saved me to claim what I guard. They will not stop until they have either you or me. I didn't save you for power," Claire said. "I couldn't let you drown." Elara's fox-like ears tilted as if listening to something far off. "Sometimes the river chooses its savior for reasons we cannot see." The elder gave a low whistle, a signal. The dragons' heads lifted, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Claire felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. Somewhere in the dark ahead, twigs snapped. A moment later came the unmistakable metallic click of a rifle safety being released. "Down!" Claire hissed. A blue pulse of light slashed through the trees, striking the boulder where she had stood an instant before. The rock sizzled and smoked. Energy weapons, government issue. The dragons moved as one. The white one surged forward with a hiss, a flash of movement too fast for the human eye. A soldier cried out as he was thrown backward into the undergrowth. Another fired, but the dark-scaled dragon leapt, wings flaring, and knocked the rifle aside with a sweep of its tail. Claire brought up her own rifle, firing a burst toward a shadow among the trees. A figure ducked behind cover. The elder shouted something in his own tongue, and the ground beneath one soldier's feet shifted, roots twisting up like serpents to entangle his legs. Elara stepped forward, her voice rising in a harsh, lilting chant. A gust of damp wind surged down the ravine, knocking two of the hunters off balance. The dragons closed in, their low growls vibrating through the ground. For a moment, the skirmish was a blur of gunfire, flashing claws, and the acrid scent of scorched earth. Then one of the hunters threw a small humming sphere toward them. "Scatter!" Claire yelled. The sphere hit the ground and erupted in a burst of blue-white arcs. Electricity crackled out in a widening circle. The dark dragon roared in pain as the energy lashed across its flank. Elara cried out and dropped to one knee, her fox-like ears flat against her head. The white dragon lunged and clamped its jaws around the device, flinging it into the river where it hissed and went dark. The hunters retreated, dragging their injured comrade. Claire fired a warning shot after them but didn't pursue. Her heart pounded as she turned back to Elara. Elara's breathing was ragged, but she pushed herself upright. "I am not hurt badly," she said. Her eyes, however, were bright with something more than pain, anger, and a deeper resolve. The elder looked grim. "They will bring more, and worse. We cannot linger. We must reach the hollow stone before the next moonrise." Claire glanced at the dark dragon, which shook itself and let out a low rumble but seemed unbroken. She felt the weight of what had just happened, a real battle, not just running and hiding. "We'll get there," she said, more to herself than anyone. "We have to." As they started forward again, the mist closed in behind them, swallowing the traces of the fight. But Claire knew the hunters would return, and next time, they would come ready for the forest's resistance. The forest thinned as dawn crept over the horizon. Wisps of fog still clung to the low ground, but shafts of pale gold light pierced the trees, catching on spiderwebs and dew-beaded leaves. The air smelled of damp soil and distant rain. Claire trudged behind Elara and the elder foxman, her boots sinking slightly into the mossy trail. The two dragons padded silently on either side, watchful and tense. They had walked through the night, driven by the urgency of reaching the hollow stone before the hunters regrouped. Elara's pace slowed as the ground ahead sloped upward into a ridge. Her fox-like ears flicked forward as if hearing something beyond human range. "We're close," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I can feel it." The elder nodded. "The stone remembers its own. We'll be safe, for a while." Claire didn't like the pause that followed his words. "Safe for a while isn't safe enough," she muttered under her breath. They climbed the ridge until the forest suddenly gave way to an open hollow, a shallow bowl of land cradled by the surrounding hills. The grass here was silver-green, rippling like water in the morning breeze. At the center stood a great pillar of dark stone, half buried and ringed with shallow carvings that caught the light. The hollow stone. It was larger than Claire had imagined, easily twice her height and much wider. Its surface was worn smooth in places, but symbols, sharp and deliberate, still spiraled across it, converging on a faintly glowing seam near its heart. Elara approached it slowly, as if afraid to disturb something ancient. She placed her palm against the seam, and for an instant the symbols flared, casting a soft blue light across her face. Her expression tightened, part awe, part sorrow. Claire stepped closer, careful not to cross the shallow line of etched stones that ringed the pillar. "What is it? Some kind of monument?" The elder shook his head. "Older than monuments. It is a gate, though not to any place your kind would understand. The pact that bound the rivers and the forest to my people was sworn here." Claire stared at the pillar, unease stirring in her chest. A gate to what? Elara didn't look at her. "To a choice my ancestors turned away from. A choice I may now be forced to face." Before Claire could press her, the white dragon rumbled low in its throat, head lifting toward the ridge they had just crossed. The dark-scaled one shifted its weight, wings flexing in readiness. The elder moved to the edge of the hollow, scanning the tree line. "The hunters are near. They have followed us faster than I feared." Claire's fingers tightened on her rifle. "How many?" The elder's jaw hardened. "Enough." They set to work preparing the hollow. The dragons dragged fallen logs to form crude barriers. The elder traced symbols into the earth with a sharp piece of flint, chanting under his breath. The air inside the hollow grew heavier, tinged with the faint scent of wet stone after rain. Claire found herself standing beside Elara as the elf woman examined the stone, her fingertips gliding over the carved symbols. "You said this was a gate," Claire said quietly. "A gate to what exactly?" Elara hesitated, then answered, her voice low. "Long ago, my king were given a choice, to stay bound to this world, or to step through the stone into another realm, one where we would be safe, but no longer part of the rivers and forests we had sworn to protect. Most chose to stay. But the hunters seek to break the pact and force the stone open. They believe something powerful waits beyond." Claire swallowed hard. "And you? What do you believe?" Elara finally turned to meet her gaze. "I believe that crossing the gate would mean abandoning everything that makes us who we are. Yet, I fear the hunters will not rest until they tear it open." The air trembled faintly, a vibration too subtle for human ears, but not for the dragons. Both beasts raised their heads in unison, eyes glinting. The elder stiffened. "They're coming." The first skimmer appeared above the ridge, engines whining as it descended into sight. Its dark shape hovered like a predatory bird, light sweeping the hollow. Behind it, smaller drones flitted ahead of a line of armored figures advancing down the slope. Claire knelt behind the log barrier, rifle ready. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The elder raised his hands, and the carved lines in the hollow glowed faintly, a thin shimmering field rising between the defenders and the hunters. It would not hold long, but it might slow the first assault. The hunters opened fire, blue-white pulses hammering the barrier. Sparks flared where the energy struck the field. One of the drones swept low, releasing a spray of metallic spheres that clattered across the hollow's floor. Elara's eyes went wide. "Scatter!" The spheres popped open, releasing spidery machines that skittered toward the stone. The dragons lunged, claws slashing, tails lashing down to crush the small constructs. But more followed. Claire aimed and fired at the drones, her shots puncturing two before they could drop more machines. The air filled with the smell of scorched metal and the hiss of ruptured circuitry. Still, the barrier flickered, its glow weakening. The elder gritted his teeth. "They mean to breach the stone." Elara stepped forward, eyes locked on the hunters. "Not while I still draw breath." The white dragon reared back and released a jet of icy mist, freezing one of the skimmer's thrusters. The craft lurched sideways, struggling to regain balance. The dark-scaled dragon pounced on another drone, crushing it between its jaws. Claire fired at the nearest hunter, forcing him to duck behind a ridge of rock. But as she reloaded, her gaze caught on a figure moving through the chaos, a tall man in matte black armor, carrying a staff-like device that pulsed with a red glow. He wasn't firing. He was heading straight for the hollow stone. "Elara!" Claire shouted, pointing. Elara's ears flicked back, eyes narrowing. She moved to intercept, the elder at her side. The man raised the device and drove it into the ground just outside the hollow's barrier. The earth shuddered as the red glow spread outward, crackling against the weakening field. The elder cried out in warning, but the barrier shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Hunters surged forward. Elara darted to the stone, her palm pressing against the seam. The ancient symbols flared bright blue, clashing with the device's red glow. For a moment, the air itself seemed to tear, wind whipping through the hollow in wild spirals. Claire scrambled toward her, dodging a burst of energy fire. "What are you doing?" Elara's voice was barely audible over the roar of colliding forces. "Holding it closed." The elder shouted, urging the dragons to cover them. The beasts roared and leapt into the fray, claws slashing, wings battering soldiers back. Claire knelt beside Elara, gripping her arm. "You can't hold it alone." "I must," Elara gasped. "If the gate opens now, we will lose more than this battle." The red glow from the device intensified, arcs of energy snapping between it and the stone. Cracks began to creep across the stone's surface, glowing faintly. Claire's heart lurched. They were running out of time. The cracks in the hollow stone glowed brighter with each heartbeat. A low, resonant hum rose from deep within the pillar, as though something on the other side had awakened and was pushing against the weakening seal. Wind whipped through the hollow, pulling at Claire's hair and stinging her eyes. The dragons crouched protectively in front of her and Elara, growling deep and low. Sparks leapt between the red glowing device the hunter commander had planted and the runes beneath Elara's palm. Claire shouted above the rising howl, "It's going to break open. What's behind it?" Elara's eyes stayed locked on the glowing seam. Her voice was ragged but steady. "Another world, another people. But if the hunters tear the gate open, they won't find salvation, only a flood that could drown both our worlds." The commander in black armor advanced step by slow step, energy pulses glancing off the dragon's scales. His staff device drove deeper into the ground, the crimson energy brightening. "Step aside, elf," his voice boomed, metallic through his helmet. "We will claim what your kind has hoarded for centuries." Elara's fox-like ears flattened. Her voice came as a near growl. "We swore to keep it sealed, for everyone's sake." Claire raised her rifle and fired at the commander, the shot sparking against his shoulder plate. He barely flinched, swinging the staff to deflect a second shot. The red glow pulsed harder. The elder foxman moved to flank the commander, drawing a short curved blade that shimmered with a faint blue aura. He lunged, striking the staff. The blow disrupted the energy field for a heartbeat, but the commander retaliated, knocking him back with a concussive wave. "Elara!" Claire shouted. "If we can't break that thing, the gate will open." Elara's hands trembled where they pressed the stone, blue light streaming between her fingers. "If we move now, it opens. I can hold it a little longer, but you must destroy the device." The dragons reacted before Claire could answer. The dark-scaled one lunged at the commander, slamming him against a boulder. Sparks flew as claws scraped over his armor. The white dragon swooped low, icy mist freezing the roots around the device, slowing its spread of red energy. Claire seized the chance. She ran toward the device, ducking under stray bursts of enemy fire. A drone darted toward her, but the elder hurled his blade, cleaving it in two. Sparks rained down as she reached the device. Up close, the thing pulsed with heat and a vibration that set her teeth on edge. She raised her rifle, aiming at the core. A shout rang out. The commander had thrown the dark-scaled dragon off and was charging toward her. Claire fired. The bullet struck the device's core. The red glow faltered, but did not go out. The commander closed the distance, swinging the staff in a wide arc. She barely dove aside in time, the weapon gouging a burning scar in the earth where she had stood. Elara cried out, a sharp command in her own tongue. Both dragons responded instantly. The dark-scaled one tackled the commander again, locking him in a grappling snarl, while the white dragon lashed its tail across the device, cracking its casing. The red light flickered, weakened. Claire rolled to her feet and fired again, this time straight into the fracture. The device split apart with a sharp, metallic crack. A final pulse of red energy burst out, knocking her back a few feet, but then the glow faded, leaving the runes on the stone steady and blue once more. The hum from the hollow stone subsided to a low, distant throb. The cracks on its surface ceased to spread. Elara staggered back from the pillar, her arms trembling but her eyes clear. "It's stable for now." The commander let out a guttural roar and wrenched himself free of the dragon's hold. He tried to grab for a sidearm, but the elder stepped in and drove his blade into the joint of the commander's armor. With a strangled cry, the man fell to his knees. The remaining hunters hesitated, watching their leader collapse. Then, one by one, they retreated, dragging him away, leaving the hollow littered with the wreckage of drones and the faint smell of scorched earth. When the sounds of retreat faded, only the rustle of wind through grass remained. Claire knelt beside Elara, concern tightening her chest. "You all right?" Elara managed a weary smile. "I'm standing, thanks to you." The elder came to stand before the stone, pressing his palm against the cool surface. "The seal still holds, but the hunters will return with more strength and fewer scruples." Claire rose, brushing dirt from her gloves. "Ben, we need a better plan than running and hoping for the best." Elara looked at her for a long moment. "I once thought your kind only took from the world, never gave back. I was wrong. You risked your life for me, and now for this place. If we are to keep the gate closed, it may take more than the old packs. It may take both our peoples, standing together." Claire nodded slowly. "Then let's start with the next step, warning those who'll listen before it's too late." The dragons rumbled in agreement, their eyes glinting in the first rays of dawn that touched the hollow stone. Above them, the sky was streaked with pink and gold. For a moment, the hollow was still and peaceful, but the silence was fragile, like the surface of the stone itself, unbroken for now, but tested by forces that had not yet given up. Claire looked at the horizon, where the mist hid the distant forests and rivers. She felt the weight of what lay ahead, but also, strangely, a spark of hope. They had stopped the gate this time. They might yet stop it again. If you want to see more stories of unlikely allies standing against impossible odds, subscribe now and follow for the next adventure. Your support helps us bring more cinematic sci-fi tales like this one to life.